What is the worst way you've seen someone mismanage their money? When my grandma's parents died, they left her and my great-uncle some money. A lot of money. However, since my great-uncle was single, had no kids, and owned his own business at the time, a payphone company, the will left only 1/3 of the inheritance to him, and 2/3 to my grandma, who was a single mother of 3 with only an average paying job. That alone pissed off my great-uncle quite a bit, and relations between him and the rest of the family were already a bit strained. But things were about to get worse. Instead of doing the smart thing, putting this large sum of money away, saving it for a college fund, or something similar, my grandma decided to just blow it all. She lived like she was filthy rich, like she was pulling in a ton of money every year. She took the kids on exotic vacations, luxury cruises, bought them expensive clothes and every toy they wanted. She bought a new house, a new car, and even hired a maid. Oh, and she quit her job. Needless to say, this did not last long. Within a year, every last bit of the inheritance was gone. Of course, this didn't stop her from continuing to spend like there was still money in the bank, taking on huge credit card debts. In the end, she had to sell their nice new house, her fancy new car, and many of the luxury items she had bought for the family just to pay back her debts. And since she had quit her job, she needed a new one. So she went crawling back to my great-uncle and begged him to hire her. He basically told her, bugger off. He had warned her numerous times not to spend money the way she was, and she did it anyway. He was so disgusted with her that he basically cut off contact after that. Even years later, when she was on her deathbed, he refused to give her a phone call. That said, he didn't blame the kids. He still showered them with affection and presents. He had the money to do so. But when it came to actually speaking with my grandma, there was basically no interaction other than, I'm here to pick up the kids, we're going out. These days, he's still around. He's absolutely filthy stinkin' rich. He's very old and not doing too well though. He doesn't really talk to us much. We'll hear from him maybe once every few months. Just an I'm still here call. In fact, just earlier this year was the first time I saw him in over 15 years. Not for lack of trying. He's just kind of pushed the whole family away. We never ask him for anything if you're wondering. I think we all just wanted some kind of connection with our great-uncle. I can only wonder what our family would have been like had my grandma not completely blown the inheritance and earned his wrath. Story 2. I met my second ex-husband in 1996, shortly after his first marriage imploded after 9 months. He had no money to his name, had filed for bankruptcy, and complained about his ex-wife being a gold digger. He was given a job by his sister's boyfriend just before we met. When I met his family, one of his siblings said to me, "Good luck taking him on. All red flags, right? But hey, I was in love." I'm not saying I was perfect, but I definitely had to manage the money during the 19 years we were together. We had our daughter in 1999, and yes, as an only child, she was probably spoiled more than most kids her age. More in experiences than material gifts, at least from my side. He, on the other hand, was all about material goods with her. It came to a head in 2013 when we had to file consumer proposals. Learning to live off cash only was hard, but it was a totally valuable lesson. In the summer of 2014, he had medical and psychological issues that kept him off work and on disability pay. I was doing everything to support him, bringing home the bacon, raising our daughter, advocating for him with the doctors, keeping up the house, totally stressed, frustrated, and exhausted. His vehicle bit the bullet in the summer of 2015. Since discussions with his doctors indicated a return to work soon, we had to get him a vehicle. It's not easy to get a decent loan for a car with poor credit. The deal we negotiated was at 24.5% interest, meaning we owed far more on the loan than the car was worth. Since my credit rating was better than his, the loan was in my name with him as secondary. I was practically vomiting, signing that paperwork, knowing it was a horrible deal. "You worry too much," he said, his favorite saying to me. 3 months later, he walked out of the marriage, taking the car with him. I won't bore you with all the details, but we had to sell the house since I couldn't afford it on my own. The plan was to sell the car and pay off the remaining loan with proceeds from the house sale. My daughter and I had to move into a rental because mortgages aren't given to people in near bankrupt status. I managed to get the car back 8 months later because he had taken his share of the money from the house and blown it on a pickup truck held together with duct tape, started by climbing under the hood and banging on the starter. Meanwhile, it was all brand new leather, helmet, and prescription goggles for the new Harley his new girlfriend whom he had moved in with had bought for him. Eventually, I was able to settle the score with him a bit by securing a much fairer child support and retroactive claim for our daughter's last couple of years of high school, as well as catching him red-handed committing government disability fraud by claiming our daughter lived with him in the months after he left. He loves to tell everybody how he was harassed in court by being held financially responsible for his daughter. Am I better financially now? It's hard to say. I'm still paying that car loan, but it's now through my parents' line of credit, which reduces the amount of interest I would have paid. My proposal payments are over and will soon be discharged. My daughter is now working full-time and paying room and board. I'll probably have to work until noon on the day of my funeral. It's a struggle some days. I would love to go out for dinner or the movies, but I don't have the extra funds. At least I'm not living with somebody just for their money, unlike him. Though I do have to wonder about that gold digger comment he once made to me. Story 3. Divorce. Growing up, we were close with a family that had made it big buying and selling airplane parts before the internet era. The couple went through a nasty divorce that dragged on for 6 years. The wife was completely convinced, thanks to her unscrupulous lawyers, that her husband had funneled money into secret accounts. He hadn't, and wasn't satisfied with his initial offer, the mansion, half of the multi-millions, and £5,000 a month for child support. The court proceedings lasted years, and in the end, both of them were left with almost nothing due to court and lawyer fees. His business had failed anyway after air travel became unstable post 9/11. If she had just taken the original offer, the mansion and the other payments, she would have walked away with £4,200,000 without having worked a day in her life. TLDR, divorce is a hell of a drug. Story 4. I have a colleague in her mid-50s who is divorced with no kids. She is entirely responsible for her own finances, no parents or siblings to fall back on, and lives alone in an apartment. She recently took out her second debt consolidation loan. As soon as she maxes out her credit cards, she takes out a loan, pays them off, and runs them up again. I'd feel sorry for her if the charges were for basic living expenses, but they're not. They're for highlights in her hair, manicures, trips to the Caribbean with her latest boyfriend, and cute sandals she'll wear twice before replacing with a newer pair. High-end everything: makeup, perfume, clothing. Occasionally, she laments about her £40,000 loans and being just 2 paychecks away from homelessness. I gently suggest that fewer trips to salons in the islands might improve her financial position. I work hard and I deserve nice things. I deserve vacations. I deserve to feel good and look good. Don't tell me how to spend my money, she insists. This, coming from a woman who has to pay for her lunch with a credit card the day before payday because she's overdrawn on her checking account. I've seen it happen, and she has explained why. She refuses to believe she's the cause of her own financial difficulties. Story 5. In 1987, I employed a guy as a cold caller, paying him $5 an hour back in the heyday of the stock market. It was a terrible job, but people got their licenses hoping to make more money. 10 years later, this geeky guy called me. My number was unlisted. He remembered me. I guess I had made an impression. I had left the business and asked for referrals to get into the money market business, which was a bit more lucrative. That's another story, but at the time I was earning far less than everyone else by hundreds of thousands. I was making $24,000. Everyone else was making at least $100,000. So this guy calls me about the stock market. I listen, though I don't understand much. It had something to do with Richard Ney. I had very good credit and was proud of my Amex Gold card, so I took out a loan of $3,000 on it and gave it to him. I also bought him a new PC. I was hoping he'd make me enough money to get out of the rat hole I was in. He lost it all. I never spoke to him again, and I paid off my debt. 4 years later, I got laid off from this job because they told me I just didn't get it, even though I was meeting the expectations of $5,000 a month in brokerage alone, and in fact exceeding them by bringing in $8,000 a month. Everyone else was making at least $250,000 a year. I was making $24,000. What the heck? So this guy calls me again. Being geeky and inept at life, he doesn't have a license, and his mom had passed away. I help him manage this life event, which sucks. I got a truck because I had a license to clear out his mom's apartment. We take the furniture he wants to keep, the refrigerator, and rent a storage space for them. I ask, why don't we just throw it away? He says, no, why? It's still good. I'm like, okay, fine, buddy, whatever. It also turns out he inherited $500,000. This was around 1995. I told him to buy a house, get out of the apartment he was sharing with his old dad, live on his own, set up some investments, and generate some income. He wasn't working anyway. He was living off his dad's income. His dad was an instrument maker who crafted fine instruments. They didn't sell often, maybe 1 or 2 a year, but when they did, they went for a high price, and he had a bunch stacked up. So I'm like, dude, you can be somewhat independent. You don't have to work. This is an ideal situation. Do this thing for me, please. Instead, he buys a bigger PC and says, I know I can make money in the stock market, but tell me what you're doing, because I want to learn. I want to follow along. I spend days with him when I can, while I'm out of work, since I have the time. I don't really understand it. I take a job doing whatever I can because I can't pay my rent. I'm already behind, thanks in part to the relationship I had with his awful girlfriend. Well, I thought she was a girlfriend, supposedly abused as a child, though maybe that was a lie too. Anyway, I'm in debt up to my ears with no way to pay it off, about $10,000 in debt. So I asked him, hey, can you help me out? He hems and haws, trying to be all high and mighty. He has every right to. Who am I to complain? He gives me $5,000. I think, amen, brother. I could really use 10 because it's starting to crush my credit rating. He says nothing. Okay, fine, whatever. Life goes on. I get a slightly better job, the job I want to start getting out of the hole a little. I get served, but I'm able to deal with that and start chipping away at the old debts. He called me up. He'd lost all the money, everything his mom left him. He was still living with his dad, back to square one. Then his dad dies and leaves him another $500,000. I tell him he's got to get his act together right now. He needs to get out of the subsidized apartment in Stuyvesant Town, get his own place, start setting up a stock portfolio, all of it. He says he still thinks he can do it. Around that time, I got a better job, the one I'm in now. At 34, I realized this is it. This is what I had to stick with. I'm 54 now. He loses that money again. In the meantime, I pay him back the money he lent me, plus 30% interest. He tells me to put it into the stock account he's running so we can make money off it. I say okay. He loses that too. Then he calls me up, asking for $20 because he needs to eat. I go over, not doing so well myself, health-wise. I give him $20 and say, you've got to get a friggin' job. During this time, while he was trying to get his life in order, he was taking dancing lessons. One day, he tore his knee up, so I ended up doing shopping for him and his dad while his dad was still alive. His dad was old and just handling basic things like paying bills and shopping. Meanwhile, the company I'm in starts going downhill. They say, we're going to move people to a lower-cost area somewhere in Florida. Do you want to go? I say, sure. This guy is now homeless because the place he was in is being taken over by MetLife. MetLife decides they're done with the ideal, Ayn Rand-style, private subsidized, good-for-the-people setup. Stuyvesant Town is being privatized, so either you pay the comparable rent or get out. So he's homeless and living in a shelter. I tell him, come over to my place if you need to take a shower, which he does regularly. My apartment is small, and I don't mind if he falls asleep in front of the TV while he's there for a little while. But then I tell him, hey man, I'm leaving soon. You've got to think of something. You've got to reach out to your family wherever they are, your cousins or whoever. I don't know what he's doing now, and I don't really care. Oh, and get this. His dad, the one who made all those instruments, before he died, he finished about 30 instruments except for one final step, something any beginner could do. All they had to do was that one little thing. I could do it and sell them. All the craftsmanship was already done. He was getting $5,000 or $6,000 per instrument. I said, dude, you've got all these instruments taking up space. Juilliard is right down the road. Put up a sign, tell people to come, sell them for $2,000 or $3,000 each and get some money in. He wouldn't do it. Never found the time or whatever. I moved away and he got a job. He could have been sitting pretty. Story 6. A friend's mother, let's call her Chris, was really bad with money. Probably the worst case I've ever seen. Chris had ways of making money. My husband and I suspected she had sugar daddies because she would receive money randomly after a date and then quickly move on to someone else. She frequented Christian dating sites and spent a lot of time on the phone talking about God with various men. I'll admit, she was very good at it. She also made money through what she called trading. Whenever she acquired money, she would treat everyone to dinner and promise to get gifts for everyone, including my husband and me. She didn't cook, except occasionally fried chicken. Her family's diet consisted entirely of pizza, McDonald's, Burger King, Chinese takeout, and other fast food. She would give us her bank card to buy 20 pounds worth of Coca-Cola, then ask us to spend 100 pounds on fast food for the house. Afterwards, she would complain about how her money was running short and how they still had to pay her. She also let her 5 kids have free reign of her money. All of them had World of Warcraft subscriptions, so anyone familiar with the game can imagine how much that cost. Chris bought a house in an attempt to get some of her other kids out on their own. The house was eventually left to rot because no one wanted to move in, and she didn't take care of it. One time, she came into around 30,000 pounds at once and was thrilled, so thrilled in fact that she immediately bought a brand new BMW, then complained that the house had no food. A few days later, she somehow got 900 pounds and spent it all on food and Coca-Cola from Walmart. Given that her kids ate like wild animals, it was gone in about a week. We tried suggesting cheaper stores for groceries, but she refused, saying it was beneath her. Sam's Club and Walmart were the only places she would go. A couple of years ago, she couldn't keep up with her lifestyle anymore. She wasn't making money like she used to, and had no choice but to move in with her oldest son. Some of her other kids moved out and were doing okay. She became ill and tried to apply for a grant at the local SSI office, but she died in her sleep before ever receiving the money. Story 7. The lady I work with is in her early 70s. She was complaining about not having any money and how the cost of living keeps rising while her paycheck does not. Meanwhile, she has £16,000 in credit card debt. After her daughter, she has 2 daughters and a son, had already helped her pay it off once. She asked me how she could budget her money better, so I said, sure, let's take a look. Her kids pay for some things, her cell phone, gas card, and car insurance. So I asked her, why do you have both cable and dish? She's lucky to live in an area where she can get cable and internet. She replied, that way I can have both Hallmark channels. I understand enjoying your feel-good shows, but if you already get one Hallmark channel with cable, why pay for the second through Dish? Plus, the cable package duplicates some movie channels that are also on Dish. Dropping Dish could save her nearly £62 per month. Story 8. I'm pretty good at mismanaging my own money, if that counts. I mean, I pay my bills, but the rest is blown on frivolous crap. My parents, though, they really knew how to mess up a small fortune just right. My dad, at a few brief times, was making close to $300,000 net a year. Yet I spent most of my life living in a trailer. Not a nice new trailer either, or even one that had been maintained more like a last resort 70s model home for family and friends who had screwed up. My dad wasn't entirely at fault for blowing the money that was supposed to support the family he chose not to opt out of when he didn't have my brother and me aborted. He had money-making ventures that could have worked, but he invested in them and then never followed through. Add in his fierce drug and alcohol consumption, more frivolous crap, and the money disappeared. My mom, on the other hand, was a magician. My mom and dad were married, still married technically, for about 17 years after only knowing each other for a month, give or take a week. Now, you're probably thinking, 17 years together couldn't have been that bad, right? No, they're both pieces of crap, exactly alike in a uniquely messed up way. Anyway, once my mom left, my dad had to come home, be an adult, and figure out the finances. When it was all tallied up, he was over $500,000 in debt, which explains the trailer. The power bill alone was just over $2,000, and at first we could only wonder how someone let it get that high. After talking to the power company, we found out she had claimed I was suffering from bone cancer and kidney failure and somehow submitted proof. Total jerk move, by the way. My mom was, and still is, a pathological liar with only an 8th grade education. My dad, who was away for months at a time with work, let her handle all the money. To this day, we don't know where most of it went. But after she left, I started remembering things. Being without power for weeks at a time, no food unless there was a party, or my dad was home, my mom taking off for 2 or more weeks. It was an honest 45-year-old ex-altar boy after hearing Dave the Priest's indictment kind of moment. Now, if this all seems sad and depressing, we probably couldn't be friends. Wrap up. Moral. I haven't seen my mom since I was 15, maybe 16, when she left, grabbing all the expensive stuff she could carry. The last thing she said to my face as she was taking my TV, after I asked what she was doing with it, was, "Screw you, it's your problem." The last time I spoke to her was 2 days after my 18th birthday, 2 weeks before my high school graduation, the first in my family to do so. I still see my dad from time to time. He's a tweaker now, which is actually a strange mix-up from his usual heavy drinking of cheap vodka and cocktails of opiates. He's living in a rundown, hand-me-down trailer, less than a mile from our old place, somehow stealing electricity, shacked up with the same pregnant-looking, bloated liver-gut woman who has landed him in jail not once, not twice, but 3 times, possibly 4. Moral: families are messy, people are flawed, life doesn't hand out fairness, but somehow you have to keep moving forward anyway. I'm nearly 21 now. Right after high school, I started a business and, with some help, was able to land a temporary 2-year highway contract route with the Postal Service. In September, I renewed for a full-term 8-year contract, guaranteeing income until at least 28. This is Reddit, so I'm sure it doesn't pull your heartstrings, but I never let it bother me. I was basically living alone with a young kid to take care of at 8, started making my own dirty money at 13, moved out by 16, partied myself out by 18, so I was ready. I wouldn't change a thing. Today, I am who I am because of the crap I endured. So screw them. 1. Never stop living for yourself. 2. Marriage is a scam. 3. Kids friggin' suck forever. Vasectomies suck for the first 7 to 14 days. Refer back to 1. 4. If you ignore 3, adopt and keep your receipt in case you end up with a jerk. 5. Remember to forget your childhood, upbringing, and excuses. Environment isn't the reason you're 30 and getting fired from Walmart. It's a good job. Drop parents, siblings, friends, or whoever is holding you back. Sometimes, even being involved with them will keep you from moving forward. Story 9. A guy I worked with was always complaining that he was poor, though I later realized it was purely due to bad budgeting and impulse spending. He was excellent at his job, so I suggested he try some freelance IT security consulting on the side. He landed a gig for a high-end jeweler that paid him around £2,000 for 2 days' work. He was ecstatic. Finally, enough money to fix all the problems he'd been putting off for ages. The oil leak on his car, a new pair of work shoes, and his boiler. At the end of the job, leaving the retailer with cash in hand, he spotted a high-end watch in a display case about £2,000, discounted from $3,500. Unable to resist such a bargain, he handed over the money and walked out with the watch instead. 2 days later, he was complaining that his fridge was empty. I told him, at least you can use the watch to time how long it takes you to starve. Story 10. The accountant at the small business I work at does a lot of funny things with money. She has a perfectly good paid-off car, but it was slightly too old to drive for Uber, so she got a lease on a brand new car through Uber. After a month, she realized she wasn't making enough extra money from Uber to even cover the lease, and her commute was too far to drive the Uber car to work and back because of mileage limits. After getting out of that lease, she decided she needed a brand new car, even though she had no idea how to ride. This was over a year ago, and she has ridden it exactly once around her neighborhood. She'll be paying for it for at least another 4 years. She also took out a second mortgage on her home to fix it up for sale. She was so pleased with the remodel that she decided to keep the house. She is a single mother twice over and is always telling us how some kind man from her church paid for her daughter's school trip or other expenses. She is the most reckless person I have ever met, and I am constantly a little freaked out that she handles our money. Story 11. A guy I knew at university spent his entire student loan allowance for the semester in just 2 weeks. To fund a night out, he took out a payday loan around £100 at an extortionate interest rate. Within a few months, he ended up owing £8,000. He got a credit card to pay it off, only to max it out in about 6 months. He didn't work while at university, and his family was on the poorer side, so he got the absolute maximum in loans and bursaries. Every time he received the money, he spent it in days on VIP tables and bottle service at clubs, not even on clothes, gadgets, or anything practical. I didn't even go to university in a particularly expensive city. Ironically, he was studying something like economics or business. He dropped out at the end of his first year and now works as a car salesman, earning a fair amount but living in a tiny studio flat. He complains that one of those furniture rental places won't let him rent something like a 60-inch TV and a PlayStation 4 because his credit is so bad. We all tried to warn him, but he called us stupid because it was free money. Story 12. My coworker is separated from his wife, but they won't divorce. She doesn't work and has no intention of getting a job. He pays rent on the condo where his wife and son live, plus rent on his own place, neither of which is cheap, on top of payments for 2 old junky cars that are falling apart. They constantly pamper their son with a new phone, a new computer, and other things he never even asked for. He takes lessons from 2 piano teachers because they can't bring themselves to fire the first one, who isn't working out. On top of that, they go on vacation at least 3 times a year, all charged to credit cards that he has no intention of ever paying off. He's probably easily 5 figures in credit card debt. He doesn't even pick up his phone anymore because it's usually a debt collector. The guy clears easily £60,000 to £70,000 a year after taxes, plus collects Social Security and still complains he can't make ends meet. He can't afford to retire and will probably literally die in his office. He's a really nice dude, but oh my god, he has no idea what to do with a dollar. Story 13. I know a guy used to be a friend who bought a car for €5,000 in another country. The test drive was with the seller and they never went above 15 kilometers per hour. He then had to drive 1,500 kilometers back to his own country. Along the way, he found 20 things wrong with the car before it broke down. He paid to have it towed and stored while they figured out what was wrong, then spent €1,500 getting it fixed. He drove it home, found new problems, and fixed small things like the windshield wipers himself. He took it to a new repair shop, and somewhere in between, he bought a new interior and had it delivered to the shop. The repairs at the new shop were too expensive, so he sold the car with the interior for €3,000. He then bought the car back for €2,000 to try fixing it himself with his uncle's help. Somehow, he bought it again for €2,500, spent around €1,500 more on repairs, tires, and storage, and eventually sold it again for €1,500 after his uncle gave up. In short, he blew a ton of money on nothing. Story 14. My brother's girlfriend went to a loan shark. She took out a loan for $900 and excitedly told my brother that she was making a $300 profit because the interest was 60%. My brother completely freaked out and asked her what was wrong. She said it was a good financial choice because they were charging her 60% interest, meaning she only owed $600. She honestly thought interest was just the percentage of the loan you pay back, not the percentage you pay on top of the loan. She's also been in 3 different car accidents and has several other loans from different loan sharks to repay. On top of that, she's in afterpay debt because she didn't realize you had to make more than one payment. She just thought it was a way to get a discount. Story 15. This one is a long story because it's not a single mistake. It's 6 years of, oh no, I'm doing the right thing. When my father passed away, he left my mother in charge of the trust fund, which had roughly £8 million in it, plus an additional £700,000 per year coming in. A great place to be. My mother decided the best way to handle the properties was to get rid of them. Not sell them wisely, just get rid of them. Her high-low point was a property in upstate New York, a house valued at £50,000. She was pumping £100,000 per year into maintenance. After 5 years, £500,000 total, she finally rented out the house. She immediately listed it for sale at £45,000. It sold for around £42,000, but she wasn't done losing money yet. Some outright fraud appeared in the form of a mysterious lien on the property from several owners ago, killing the sale. Instead of sending the person to prison, she sent a lawyer to negotiate. An agreement was reached. She listed the house again, this time for £17,000, since no one would buy a house with a lien at full price, and it sold for £12,000. But she still wasn't done losing money. She paid the commission on the completed sale, the commission on the failed sale, the lawyer, and the lien. In the end, she sold the £50,000 house at a net loss of £3,000. She's the only person I know who can lose £553,000 on a £50,000 property. She's done several things like this and has bankrupted the trust. She blames my father for leaving her with nothing. Story 16. A friend of mine had her car repossessed. The company told her, if you pay what you owe, you'll get it back. She was waiting for a decent-sized tax refund, around $5,000 to $6,000. But instead of using it to get her old car back, she bought another one because her old car had problems she didn't want to fix. She bought the new car from one of those shady dealerships that don't even check credit scores or whether you have a valid license. She even faked her pay stubs. Surprise, she doesn't actually work. The dealership went along with it anyway. The car itself was a 2006 Chevy Malibu with 160,000 miles on it. The deal with the dealership is that they don't fully disclose every problem with the car, or she didn't ask. So if you buy it, drive it a mile, and it breaks down, it's on the buyer. Super shady. She put down around $500, and every week for 11 months she has to pay $75. Needless to say, she's horrible with money. She gets 3 or 4 payments behind, and only when they threaten to repossess the car does she pay a little. She won't even get insurance. I call her a friend, but I use that term lightly. She has asked many times to borrow money. We used to give her $20 here and there, and she would pay it back. But a year ago, I gave her $60, and about a week later, when I knew she had been paid, I asked for it back. She ignored me for a week. After that, it was excuse after excuse. She and her boyfriend got robbed. Both their phones broke, so she couldn't pay me back or call me. I stopped giving her any money and avoided her at all costs. She paid me back $20 2 months later and now only calls when she needs something. Just today, she called my roommate, hoping one of us would drive to her mom's house, which takes 30 minutes to pick her up and then take her to another town, 45 minutes to an hour away. She said she couldn't use her car because it had no gas and she had no money for gas, but somehow expected us to taxi her around for free. My roommate worked all day and I had to get our house ready for Thanksgiving, so we said no. The cherry on top was that she needed $80 for Thanksgiving supplies for her and her kids. It's a joke. The only reason I haven't blocked her is that we've become very close with her kids. We always go out of our way to see them and buy them toys on birthdays and Christmas. I don't have any kids, nieces or nephews, so they're the closest I think I'll have, and I feel bad for them. Their grandmother is great, but there's only so much she can do. The mom can only be around once or twice a week because she and her boyfriend like to blow the money they make from selling food stamps, doing odd jobs, and getting money from family members. I recently found out they've even been selling drugs. Instead of getting a decent apartment, they spend $60 to $80 a night on hotel rooms. My roommate and I figured they spend close to $1,000 a month on hotels. They could get a great apartment for half of that, but won't, because they're one of those couples that break up and get back together every other day. I recently told her to stop calling me to talk crap about the boyfriend. She'll be back together with him tomorrow. It's just a big mess. And the last thing to this trashy story, he owes 6 figures in child support and won't get a job because the government will take most of it. He owes his mother $60,000 and he has 10 kids, so he's wanted by the law. My friend has 7 pending felony charges for getting caught with pharmacy store items in her purse and for bringing some into jail. I'll just let you guess how. So hopefully, when they go to jail, they might become better people. But I'm not holding my breath. Story 17. Every day I see my low-wage coworkers buying breakfast and lunch at restaurants. Unbelievable. At $10 per day for coffee and breakfast, and $15 per day for lunch, that's $25 a day. Multiply that by 5 workdays per week and 52 weeks per year, and that's $6,500 a year paid in after-tax dollars. Meanwhile, my breakfast costs 7 cents per day, oatmeal from a canister, not individual packets, and lunch is 40 cents. Let's call it 50 cents a day. Multiply that by 5 days for 52 weeks per year, and that's $130 a year on breakfast and lunch. There's no prep or shopping time. I just buy 3 containers of oatmeal, bring one to work as needed, pop it into the microwave at work, and eat it at my desk. So not only does breakfast cost me 7 cents, but I get paid to eat it too. For lunch, I also eat at my desk and get paid. During my lunch break, I get an entire hour to do whatever I want. Read, go for a walk, make important phone calls, whatever. I'm not spending 15 minutes driving to a restaurant, parking, walking in, waiting in line, placing an order, eating, walking back to the car, driving 15 minutes back, getting out, and walking into the office. What an utter waste of time and money. All my coworkers complain about not having money or time. Well, no kidding. Basically, they're paying 5,000% more for food than I do for similar meals. That's the same, percentage-wise, as paying $2,500,000 for a $50,000 Jeep Grand Cherokee. I talked to my coworkers about the lottery and asked what they would do with the money. Almost everyone says the same thing. They would give a crap load away, buy a house for their parents, give everyone at the office money, and on and on. That's why most lottery winners go broke in 3 to 5 years. If you win the lottery, I don't want your friggin' money. What I want is for you to conserve your money. Keep it for yourself. Be wise and be conservative. But it's a mindset. I remember showing a broke coworker how to spend $15 to $30 by purchasing glasses through a certain website multiple times because she always complained about being broke at least 8 or 10 times in a few weeks. What did she do? She went to an optical store and spent $350 on a pair of glasses that were no better than what she could have gotten for $35 at the place I told her about. That's 1,000% more. Where can you get a 1,000% return on an investment? You can't. I asked her why, and she just said, I just made a mistake. Crap, I friggin' told you 8 times, went over the math, you complain you don't have money, and drag me into your personal life. That is not a mistake. That is just messed up. I want to assist people and help them understand, but you can't. You just can't. It doesn't matter if this is taught in school or anywhere else. I spell it out exactly for people, and they still do this stupid crap. Oh well. I'm not angry, just my opinion. Story 18. A former coworker in her mid-30s lived with her parents, paying zero in monthly expenses. She owned a 15-year-old car and had racked up what she estimated was $60,000 to $70,000 in debt for cross-stitch supplies. Her parents paid off that debt. A year later, she was hiding from them the fact that she was currently $18,000 in debt, all related to cross-stitching. Guy A and his girlfriend B lived with roommate C. They split the rent 50-50, though B shouldn't have had to pay anything since she was A's girlfriend. Unbeknownst to C, he was actually covering the entire rent because A and B's money management skills were abysmal. They never had enough for rent. They were too busy eating like royalty and going out on dates, which Ty also partially financed, paying $200 a paycheck for groceries. B did the grocery shopping, and they easily went through $100 a week just on soda. Yet we always had to hear how they were short on rent and utilities. The only time A ever put his foot down with B was when he refused to replace the transmission in his car so they could drive it one last time to the junkyard. When they bought a new car, B bragged for days about how low the monthly payment was, either not caring or not realizing that the horrendous interest rate had added thousands to the final cost. From the start, they made every payment late. When A's grandmother passed away, he received a sizable inheritance. A month later, he had gambled away half of it, and B had used the other half to buy brand new furniture, which their pets, none of them house-trained, promptly used as a toilet. Guy D marries his girlfriend E. They both smoke weed multiple times a day. E believes that her worth as a person is tied to her looks and spends a large amount of money on upkeep. For the longest time, they had agreed they didn't want any kids. Then, after weeks of hearing a coworker say, kids are the only thing that makes life worthwhile, E decides she needs one. She stops using birth control, and D, apparently not understanding female reproductive biology, goes along with it. He's furious when she gets pregnant, but they eventually work it out. After the baby arrives, they file for bankruptcy, and E declines to return to work, choosing to be a stay-at-home mom. A year and a half later, they are surviving off payday loans and money E begs from her parents. They prioritize buying weed over everything, and E requires a large amount because if she can't smoke every few hours, she becomes overwhelmed and forgets how to function. E excitedly announces that they are expecting baby number 2 and confides to her friends that after the baby is born, they plan to file for bankruptcy again. She staunchly refuses to listen to anyone who tries to explain that it won't be possible. Story 19. I've had the same group of friends since high school. One friend in particular, whom I don't associate with much anymore, has always had things given to him by his parents. His dad bought him a brand new Jeep about 11 years ago. Several years later, he convinced his dad to co-sign a loan to put a lift on the Jeep, even though he was working part-time at minimum wage. $15,000 later, he was struggling to make payments due to impulse spending. He suddenly took an interest in woodworking and bought $1,000 worth of tools to make simple furniture. Once he started falling behind on his loan and credit card payments, he began asking our group of friends to bail him out. I was a poor college student at the time, so I had no money to spare. Another friend, however, was doing fairly well and decided to lend him $300, trusting that he would repay it as soon as possible. Of course, the next time we saw him, he had a new gaming console, but he still hadn't paid back our friend. Over the next 6 months, he bought a bunch of other useless items and sold them for chump change once he got bored. Falling even deeper into debt, he decided to trade his nice Jeep with all its cool upgrades for an older, higher mileage truck that guzzled even more gas than the Jeep. About a month later, the truck started having mechanical issues, and he tried to sell it. He eventually paid back our friend, making it seem like he was doing him a favor. By this point, my best friend and I hardly ever hear from him anymore. We tried to be understanding and maintain the friendship, inviting him to important events, weddings, baby parties, bachelor parties, and casual hangouts, but he never shows up, always claiming he's busy with something important. After a couple of months of not hearing from him, I got a text asking for a favor. Since I had recently graduated and started a well-paying position, I knew immediately the favor would involve money. He was asking for $400 for a remote control car for his dad's birthday. I politely declined and have since given up trying to maintain this friendship. At 30 years old, he's still living with his parents. There's nothing inherently wrong with living with your parents, but when you refuse to make any effort to improve your situation despite having the resources, the responsibility is on you. His current plan seems to be relying on inheriting property from his girlfriend's and future ex-wife's parents. Solid plan. Story 20. I worked retail with a woman who told me she couldn't afford food at home because she, her husband, and their baby were eating out too much. I tried explaining that buying groceries and cooking would be far cheaper. Her excuse? She didn't know how to cook. I'm not the type of person to make excuses for people like that or to associate with that mindset. Another example, a coworker from my solar job moved his family into a $3,500 suite while working with us. Even with decent pay, it didn't make sense to me to uproot the family and spend that much just to provide. I later learned he had been working in our state for about 4 years, bouncing from Airbnb to Airbnb, chasing paychecks from different companies. The same coworker from the solar job asked me to help him pick up a car. Apparently, it was time for him to get wheels. This guy talks a lot about grinding and making money, and I respected him to a point because he was a hard worker. Anyway, he buys an Acura RL because it has a V6 engine and all-wheel drive. I drove 2 hours to check it out. The car was a piece of junk, well over 100,000 miles. He kept insisting it was a great deal for a fixer-upper, saying he knows people who drive cars past 200,000 or 300,000 miles. I let him lie to himself. Sometimes you just can't fix stupid. He dropped $2,000 on the car, which didn't start until they replaced the battery. The fluids were dry, and the whole car and the situation was a total crap show. My sister was trying to flex on me, bragging that her son had a brand new car, not one to be flexed on. I asked a few qualifying questions. Sales habits die hard. Turns out my nephew is paying $800 a month for the car, plus insurance. My nephew is leasing a car. His parents thought it was a good idea because it covers repairs and would supposedly fix his credit. I tried explaining that at 19, with a $1,700 monthly income, he'd be better off buying a cheap used car. He wouldn't be drowning in payments or destroying his credit. Their reasoning? He can afford it. That left him with just $900 for everything else each month. Fast forward, he's struggling to pay. Wants to own the car since he's already poured money into it and is now reeling after I explained how interest rates actually work. Story 21. It was me. I made a stupid decision. I went in for an oil change, and they told me my car needed so much work that I'd be better off buying a new one. I was moving to a big city, my car wasn't running great, so I thought, sure, maybe a new car is the right move. I told the salesperson what I could afford in payments. He said, you just got your degree, moving to a big city, you can afford more than that." I hesitated. "Well, I really like this car." We haggled for a bit. After 3 hours, I got uncomfortable and asked if I could take my car and get some dinner. They kept insisting it wasn't ready. Then he said I couldn't leave because I might not come back to buy it. I panicked and promised I would buy the car if they let me leave. I even called my dad, but he was too busy. I'm pretty timid, and in the end, I bought a car I couldn't afford. I moved to Boston, and it took a couple of months to find a job. I didn't fully realize how expensive rent was. I fell behind on my car payments and came home one day to find my car had been repossessed. That wasn't the stupid part. The stupid part came when I decided I needed another car to get to work. I ended up at one of those shady no credit, no money down dealerships and bought a used Hyundai. Big mistake. The car turned out to be a complete lemon. 6 months after buying it, the car broke down. I took it to the shop and shelled out a couple $1,000s in repairs, but I could still barely drive it around the block on street cleaning days. Naturally, I racked up several parking tickets because I couldn't move it in time. Eventually, it got towed. The tow yard fees were over $1,000, and even after paying that, I'd be stuck with a car that barely ran and would continue collecting tickets. I called the bank, explained the situation, and told them they could pick it up from the tow lot. From that day on, I decided I'd never get another car unless I could buy it outright. Luckily, I live in NYC now, so a car isn't even necessary. Story 22. I'm really annoyed with my in-laws right now, so here's a quick list of idiotic financial moves from my brother-in-law, who's about 37 now. Knocked up a girl in high school. Child support for the next 18 years. In his early 20s, financed a car with a 22% interest rate. A few years ago, when the brakes failed on his car, he bought a brand new car instead of repairing it. He and his wife spend a combined $400 a month on cigarettes. He makes $70,000 a year but lives in squalor and somehow has no money. The worst part? The family finances are a total mess, like forced communism. The house is in one person's name, utilities in another, cars in another. When I met my husband, no one was even living in the house or driving the cars that were in their names. Right now, I have 5 vehicle titles in my filing cabinet, but only 2 cars. I've finally extracted my husband and his mother from that mess. My mother-in-law now rents a house from me and is out of the house her brother-in-law owns. He never even lived there. The house was just in his name. Get this, she felt guilty for leaving because they had used her credit to buy a car, so her house payment to him was going toward his car payment, and he was paying her house payment. She thought that was fair since he bought the house for her. The house itself cost $55,000 about 15 years ago, likely with a terrible interest rate. It's in awful condition, a double-wide trailer with plywood covering rotten holes in the floor, leaky plumbing, and carpenter bees infesting the wood outside. It had basically no maintenance for years. I think they should just sell it as is and be done with it. Nope, they're fixing it up themselves, even though they live 3 hours away. Did I mention there's no hardware store within 30 miles? She moved out in August, and as far as I know, no progress has been made. My mother-in-law tried to find renters, but only low-quality tenants want low-quality houses, so that fell through. Now they're trying to rope my husband into helping fix it up, and I really hope he says no. Her brother would rather throw $540 down the drain every month than sell it for a potential loss. I don't know why I care so much. It's not my problem. I just want a pleasant Thanksgiving with these people, so I'm going to try not to bring it up. Story 23. I grew up fairly wealthy and attended a private school with many other affluent kids. I knew one girl whose 2 wealthy parents passed away when she was young, so she lived with her uncle. She was troubled as a child, really wild, always the first to try anything, but in her own way incredibly sweet, always looking out for the less popular kids. When she turned 21, she inherited a huge trust fund. Her uncle resisted, knowing she might go a little crazy with it. It wasn't about the money. He had far more than she did. In the end, he lost, and she received everything. It was the beginning of the end for her. She blew through massive wealth in 2 years, indulging in untold amounts of cocaine, binge drinking, trips to wild places, and constantly surrounding herself with people using her for party money. We're talking millions of dollars, not a cent invested. 2 years later, she was back with her uncle, not a penny to her name. He loved her, of course, and took her in. Everyone who had clung to her during those years was gone, and many laughed at her behind her back. A few OD and years of addiction left her a little slow. She tried school, but it didn't work. Her uncle gave her a job, but it was just a token gesture. At least she was lucky to have someone to look after her in the end. Story 24. I used to work in a bank offering investment and lending advice, car loans, mortgages, retirement savings, that sort of thing. I had a client who was a successful lawyer, and his father was a very successful lawyer. He married another successful lawyer. Together, they made easily over £1 million each per year, £2 million gross household income. Yet every week they had zero money left. I tried to help by setting up automatic contributions to a savings account. The idea was if they didn't see it, maybe they wouldn't spend it. Nope, they spent it anyway. Every week they would call me to transfer the money back into their checking account. I sat down with them to review their budget. They didn't have one. They had no concept of what things cost, no clear grasp of how much they made or spent, and bought impulsively and recklessly. At the time, the Dodge Viper was a big deal. He went out and bought one, financing it. He didn't have space for it, so he rented storage. He never drove it, but had it customized with expensive aftermarket parts. It was a work of art, a total money pit, and he had no interest in showing it off. She had never cut her own fingernails or toenails. Her whole life, she went for weekly mani-pedis. More often if she chipped a nail. She shopped a lot and always looked amazing. They were very smart people, but had grown up with money and had no concept of it, as if it would always just be there. I tried to help them budget, but that requires deciding to go without something or delaying a purchase, something they had never done before. So why start now? I left the bank and they were still living week to week. Wonderful people, but with no real concept of money. Story 25. My friend started a gaming store, tabletop games, Magic the Gathering, Dungeons and Dragons, gaming figurines, and so on. He mistakenly thought that because he was so interested in the material, running the store would be easy. He had no business experience and had never owned a business before. He'd never had much money, always rented, often behind on bills with child support and other expenses, but he was good at penny pinching and saving. That, however, was only half the equation. He ended up borrowing a significant amount from his new wife. He set up the store in a small, out-of-the-way town. He claimed it was only temporary and was supposed to function as a storage site for shipping items sold online. Thus, he never got much foot traffic and therefore had few sales. The store also became a source of tension between him and his wife. He confided in me that the store was ultimately a way to get out of the house and away from the family, not exactly a sound reason to throw money into a business. He and his wife ended up divorcing, and he decided to close the store. He was left with a ton of merchandise filling his tiny apartment, which he was still trying to sell. Worst of all, he apparently didn't keep proper records. He now owes around £50,000 in state taxes, and that number keeps growing with fines. I find it astounding because there's no way he had enough revenue to justify that much tax liability during the time he owned and operated the store. I can't help but wonder if something else was going on behind the scenes. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update.